voice is something that's very personal. Our voice is the way that we project ourselves out into the world. It's how we make connections with other people. There's something uniquely profound about this experience of singing together. It's this idea of making the sound of your own voice, making that personal sound, but also being conscious of the sound of everyone else's voice, and that you're all working together to create something beautiful.
A very special kind of community evolves, and a very special kind of camaraderie is given organizations like Yale Glee Club, its ethos.
It's the camaraderie, it's the unique student body here, it's the history, it's great leadership, it's wonderful music.
It's the joy of singing, and through that joy, imparting joy to the people that are listening to it. And it's a great uniting factor.
The opportunity to share that experience with others, to offer a gift, it is who they are.
Through our shared passion, our love for singing, we can create powerful change.
That one voice, speaking for and reflecting all of our values here, offers hope.
It is the passing of those values from one generation to the next that makes the power of the singing come to life.
Her name is Maria Dolores Braz. She's working hard to change the lives of children and their families in one of the toughest places in Rio de Janeiro. Overhead power lines reflect the disorganization and danger to the people who live in an area called the City of God. Maria founded Casa de Santa Ana, where the old and young can find basic medical care and social programs that are helping make a difference. It was 2004 when the Yale Alumni Chorus would first visit. Soon after, a youth choir would be born. The blue t-shirts from that first visit look like new. They are taken out only for special occasions.
Nós temos crianças que chegam às vezes muito agressivas, porque no dia anterior foram agredidas em casa ou presenciaram cenas de violência. Tem várias histórias de crianças que perderam pais e mães e estão encontrando na música e nos seus avós, que também fazem música junto com eles, um amparo, um apoio maior.
It gives the students a vision of possibility. A sense of purpose. That sense of purpose, without it, you don't know what's going to happen to these children.
A amizade de todos e a ajuda e a confraternização que sempre tem. E pretendo levar pela vida toda essas amizades que eu fiz aqui.
E assim, né, desperto minha alma, acordo para a vida.
Today, the children take a rare bus ride, excited to be on their way to a local high school where the Yale Glee Club awaits their arrival.
First moment when we were singing Mujer Rendera with them, they were sitting opposite us. Most of us don't speak Portuguese, not many of them speak English. Huge age difference. Once it became clear, okay, this is going to work, we all know the music, this is going to happen, we brought them together so that we were singing not as two choirs facing each other, but as one ensemble. Really, nothing else had to happen after that.
The single biggest realization that I had was how immediate the commonalities are with people when music is being shared.
This little light of mine, this little light of mine, say, this little light of mine.
It's spiritual. It comes from a culture different from most people in the Glee Club. And it certainly comes from a culture different from the kids that we talk to today. And we all experienced what that song is about.
This little light of mine, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Bravo!
There were things that just didn't have to be explained. You know, you could just sort of sing something, and then you'd sing something over the top of that, and you build like 4 layers, and all of a sudden you've got a song, you've got music.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine.
As individual singers, maybe we can make a beautiful sound, we can make music, but when we combine with other voices, we can create something so much more profound and so much more beautiful than any of us could create alone.
This is really what all of us are in it for, is just to engage in song together. And the degree to which that thrills all of us, and certainly thrills me, I would rather have nothing else in the world.
The outreach in South America is a good example of how outreach isn't just something that can be effective for the children there. The humor and the enthusiasm that they all bring to it can have a pretty big effect on the Glee Clubbers involved.
Immediately following that rehearsal, there was such a strong sense of community. What the members of the Glee Club hoped at the end of that experience was not just that the students had a musical experience that they wouldn't have had ordinarily, but that hopefully in some small way it broadened their sense of possibility.
Singing has been important at Yale for many years, and nowhere is this more apparent than at the Frosh Bazaar.
This is the biggest recruitment push that we have. You know, the girls groups are trying to grab all the girls, the guys groups are grabbing guys, and we're looking for everyone.
It's here that upperclassmen are looking for new recruits.
Part of the Glee Club philosophy is that your friendships can be built through the music, and then also I think the quality of the music can be built with friendships too.
The combination of music and friendship is what inspired the very first Yale Glee Club. A favorite spot for informal singing was at the Yale fence. Erected in 1833 at the corners of College and Chapel Streets, the fence would quickly become the center of the social scene at Yale University. Friends and classmates often gathered here after classes to socialize and to sing. As each year passed, music was becoming more important at Yale, and chapel choirs like the Beethoven Society would be the early pioneers of singing at Yale. Through the 1840s and 1850s, the fence would continue to be the focal point of informal singing at Yale.
Singing had been an important part of the social fabric of Yale University for many, many years. These groups would come and flourish at a time where there was good leadership and a lot of interest, and then a few years later they would go away, and there was no department of music, there was no faculty of music to ensure that it stayed strong and that it continued.
In the fall of 1859, 6 men entered Yale University from Phillips Andover Academy. L.T. Chamberlain, Cortland Whitehead, Edwin Maycomber, William C. Reed, Henry E. Cooley, and Charles S. Sheldon were all freshmen of the class of 1863 and were accustomed to singing together at the academy. During their freshman year, they would find free time to continue singing together, but it was the following year that they met to create a formal organization. Entering the fall of 1860, these 6 men were granted by undergraduate permission the favor of singing on the college campus as the class of 1863. Quickly, their membership jumped to 13, and they would christen themselves as the Yale Glee Club of the class of 63.
The Yale Glee Club was the 3rd collegiate organization to be formed in the United States. I think Harvard in 1858, and Michigan in 1859, and then Yale in 1861. So that really is the sort of the beginning of the collegiate choral experience in the United States, which other schools emulated certainly from the beginning.
Fortunately for the club, they had recruited Howard Kingsbury, who was an accomplished musician and musical composer, and served as the club's first student coach.
And they got an invitation to go to Guilford. And the reason we date the founding of the Yale Glee Club to February 1861 is that that is the first off-campus performance by this group. And Gaudiamus Igitur was the very first piece and the very first public performance by the Yale Glee Club. They were really head and shoulders above the other standards of the time. By the time of the end of that academic year, it would be the spring of 1861, they gave a performance in New Haven where 500-600 leading citizens of the town attended.
Next, they prepared for a pioneering concert tour to the White Mountains of New Hampshire. 11 concerts were planned, and they would become the first glee club of the American colleges to travel on an extended concert tour. Unfortunately, the Civil War consumed America just as the Glee Club was getting its start. It weighed heavily on the minds of the young singers and their audiences, and might have spelled an early end to the fledgling ensemble. But somehow the group persevered, and as the Glee Club's reputation was growing off campus, they were also attracting the attention of the faculty, one Gustav Steckel in particular.
In the larger context, he was the first professor of music at an American college. Now, that in and of itself is groundbreaking. Many colleges did not see music as an appropriate part of the curriculum.
Developing the first music curriculum at Yale, he also became the first faculty advisor for the young Yale Glee Club.
He was coaching them. Even just the idea of starting at the same time, would have been, for some people, kind of a novel idea. A lot of the traditional Yale songs that our alumni still sing and that you still find in the collection of songs of Yale were introduced to the Glee Club by Steckel. "'Neath the Elms," for example, which is one of the most famous Yale songs.
Steckel's German roots would influence the music that was selected.
He also introduced the singing of yodels, which is a very storied history in the Glee Club. The founding members graduated in the spring of 1863. They encouraged underclassmen to adopt the name and continue what they had started,
their tours continued to expand, embarking on the first of many yacht tours in 1866, traveling to Newport and Hyannis. By 1871, the Yale Glee Club consisted of all 4 undergraduate classes. The need for a full-time coach became clear, and in 1873, the Glee Club employed the help of Thomas Shepard.
Steckel was doing all kinds of musical work on campus, and the Glee Club was just one role of many, whereas Shepard's work was really devoted to the Glee Club.
He was a prominent church musician working in New Haven. He clearly was just this beloved figure.
Shep, as he was called, had a way of making young men sing better than they thought they could. He challenged the club musically. It became the first Glee Club to introduce unaccompanied singing and the technique of accompanying solos with humming and sustained vowel sounds. Raising the club's musical standards also meant selecting only the best singers. Shepard held the first auditions for membership in 1876.
It was prestigious to belong to the Glee Club. There was an entire farm system leading up to what would be the ultimate in one's student career of singing in the Yale Glee Club.
Not too much time passed before they started taking railroad tours, and these were pretty grand luxury events. They would have their own Pullman cars. You would go down to Washington, D.C. or into the South. You would go into town, you'd have a nice little social tea set up for you by the leading patronesses of society in that city. These young men would perform at the nicest concert hall in the town, and then there'd be big dinner dances set up for them.
Thomas Shepard's leadership would help the Glee Club travel across the country, becoming the first to travel west of the Alleghenies to the cities of Pittsburgh and Chicago.
It was a really big deal, and of course, what a great emissary that the university had in these fine performers.
Yale athletic teams did not often travel far and wide to compete. They stayed in the New England area. At the turn of the century, a visit by the Yale Glee Club was a significant event in the social life of a Yale club. And what better way to relive one's college experiences than by hearing the old songs that were sung on campus.
And as the Glee Club continued to grow, they would do more than just singing. The banjo and mandolin clubs became an indispensable part of the Yale Glee Club concerts in the 1880s and 90s and entertained audiences nationwide. Thomas Shepard served for 32 years before the club lost its father figure in 1905. His long tenure was important for a still relatively young Glee Club.
The fact that Shepard stuck around for such a long time, that probably established a sense of tradition in the students that I think has carried forward even to the present day.
The Yale-Harvard Glee Club concert is a key example of how people take Yale traditions and have fun with them even in the present day.
The Friday night before the football game, and to get together with your actually campus peers and wait impatiently for those other guys to get off the stage so we could get on and show them what real Glee Club singing was about. No rivalry or competitiveness here, of course.
We're talking about students in these choirs at Yale, Westminster, and St. Olaf, Harvard, enjoying what they're doing. It's a lifeblood here, and it develops community, what I call a community of kindred spirits.
Every year, members of the Yale Glee Club host members of the Harvard Glee Club to stay overnight and go to the football game the next day, and vice versa when we're over there. And so it's nice because there is this kind of camaraderie between the groups that extends beyond just the music or just the football, but there really is a social component to it too. It's nice that before the football game, we can do our part for the Yale-Harvard tradition.
Frank Goodell would take over an organization that was enjoying its most talented musical members ever. He continued the Yale Glee Club tradition, including the successful tours traveling in Pullman cars.
It seems logical that as the group became a little bit larger, maybe singing a little bit more formally, some students within the group are forming their own smaller groups again so they can do their own thing. And the Whiffenpoofs was an early example and certainly the most famous example.
Sing the Whiffenpoofs assembled with their glasses raised on high. And the magic of their singing cast its spell.
And this was the same for a lot of the a cappella groups that were formed at Yale in the first half of the 20th century. A lot of them originally came out of the Glee Club.
The Whiffenpoofs became part of the Yale Glee Club concerts and tours. Into the first early decades of the 20th century, the Glee Club, its banjos and mandolins, and newly founded Whiffenpoofs were called gentlemen songsters off on a spree. As the musical viability of the Yale Glee Club increased, so did its role as a vehicle for aspiring student musical talent like Charles Ives.
He's one of the greatest American composers. We often sing a Yale song that Charles Ives wrote, The Bells of Yale. Cole Porter, who's perhaps the greatest American songwriter, was the president of the Glee Club in 1913, wrote songs for the Glee Club.
The Yale Glee Club gave this young, clearly very talented Midwestern boy from Indiana a vehicle.
On the horizon, an alumnus who had experienced all that the Glee Club had to offer would bring it to new heights. After World War I, there would be a new director for the Yale Glee Club. His name, Marshal Bartholomew, known by many as Barty.
Everyone that knew him walked along with him. He was a joyful man and an inspiring leader. I mean, when he walked on the stage, you just felt this surge of elation that you were about to go through this experience yet again with this extraordinary man.
During World War I, Bartholomew was in Siberia as a volunteer working with the Red Cross. He would organize prisoner of war groups in musical activities.
He became aware of how these men sort of drew together and forgot their troubles and discovered friendships amongst all the different nationalities and through song.
And he always felt that music was an international, no boundaries effort. And his whole attitude was that the singing will break down barriers and that will cross borders and that kind of thing. And I think that's his heritage.
He knew what music could do in the worst of times. Now it was time to see what music could do in the best of times. Barty had a big challenge after World War I. Many students had lost interest in the act of singing. You could listen to music on the radio or the phonograph. These new technological innovations would force Bartholomew to go out and recruit new Glee Club members. The early 20s also was a time of increased sophistication, and this spilled over into musical tastes. Jazz was in vogue. Banjos and mandolins would no longer be part of the Glee Club. Bartholomew saw these changes as an opportunity to enrich the Glee Club repertoire and at the same time continue the tradition of this undergraduate organization.
You couldn't sing one of Marshal Bartholomew's arrangements and not come away with a sense of fun and esprit de corps and the mere joy of singing together.
And he was particularly interested in sea chanties like a roving. And that magnificent, wonderful song, Shenandoah, which almost every member of the Glee Club who's ever learned Shenandoah wants to sing again and again and again.
Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you. We're bound away across the wide Missouri.
Barty led the Glee Club to more classical music, with a strong emphasis on tone and precision.
He had an understanding of choral music, particularly all-male choral music, that most people didn't have, how to get the nuances of the various parts together, and he could put them all together very well.
The Yale Glee Club by now had crisscrossed the United States by train and had visited many major cities east and west, north and south. With the advent of ocean liners and the quality of the Glee Club, it was time to bring the music to Europe.
Little lamb, little innocent lamb, I'm gonna serve God till I die.
In 1928, the first European tour visits 10 cities to outstanding reviews.
Hypocrite, tell you what he do. I'm gonna serve God till I die.
In the 1920s, and the 1930s, 40s, the idea that you could come and hear a bunch of young American college men singing these songs, that was really a novel concept. There was a lot of diplomacy happening. Often concerts would be arranged through the ambassador's office, heads of state might attend, or other prominent government officials. Prominent cultural figures might be in attendance.
Barty would include his own arrangements of popular spirituals in these concerts, a revelation for many in their European audiences.
Beyond the music, there was a chance to travel and to see the cultures of other nations and to really understand how music does unite people.
That's what has given the Yale Glee Club and organizations like it its rich tradition, because it was clearly singing. It was about singing, but it was about community at a very powerful level and about the kind of wonderful relationships and life-changing experiences that affords.
Bartholomew would start the International Student Music Council. It was a noble effort to unify students from different cultures through music.
He took his role as an educator very seriously. He saw the Glee Club as an opportunity to introduce these bright young men to great repertoire from all periods. He conducted major choral orchestral works by combining the Glee Club with choirs from women's colleges, Smith College, Connecticut College. There's a wonderful recording of the Brahms Requiem that Barty conducted in the late 1940s. We could be singing the best music from previous centuries or the best music that's being composed today was really an idea that he helped to instill in the group. That the Glee Club could be at the forefront of what's being performed musically.
As the musical range of the Glee Club had begun to embrace major musical works, some alumni questioned the perceived movement away from the early fun music.
This, of course, transcends the Glee Club, and it is in all different aspects of alumni organizing that they would choose to look at the students today and say, well, This is the way we did it, and we knew what we were doing then.
The alumni, numbering in the thousands, wanted to stay involved. So in 1937, the Yale Glee Club Associates were formalized.
The Glee Club Associates was really created to help provide advice, support, anything it could do to help the Glee Club thrive. U.S.
Senator Prescott Bush, also a Yale Glee Club president, class of 1917, would be one of the driving forces in the creation of the YGCA.
It gave the alumni network, as it were, a voice and a way of providing a means to celebrate this great tradition.
In 1939, the Yale Glee Club would take its fourth tour of Europe.
Sailing down along the coast of high Barbary, blow high, blow low, blow high, blow low. Oh, are you a pirate or man of war? Cried he. Go high, blow low, and so sailed we. Oh, I am not a pirate, but a man of war. Cried he. Sailing down along the coast of high Barbary.
This time, the influence of Nazism was very apparent.
It was just a couple of months before the Germans invaded Poland. And we went through Germany with the shades drawn on the railroad cars so that we couldn't see the armament.
The Glee Club would travel with no major problems. Little did they know that a month later, some cities and countries they toured would be invaded by Nazi Germany.
We went to Warsaw, where we met a number of people, and I have often wondered what happened to them just a month later when Hitler's Air Force started smashing Poland.
Singing is universal. It transcends language barriers, it transcends political differences. And consequently, the Yale Glee Club has been an outstanding ambassador for the United States for years, all over the world, because when they get there and start singing, there's great joy.
Argentina is a country rich in appreciation of the arts. Everywhere you look, color and texture create a feast for the eyes. And when you add the fact Argentina gave the world the tango, it becomes a feast for the eyes and ears. The Yale Glee Club is meeting with their counterpart singers from the University of La Plata Youth Choir. The students enjoy the opportunity to connect.
You didn't have to speak. Even though I did speak English, we were looking at each other and presenting and saluting. It was great. Then all you do later then is to look to the director and sing.
It's not the first time Yale has been here. Just before the U.S. entered World War II, the Glee Club made a connection to the people of La Plata that would change the musical landscape there forever.
This was a group that traced its origins back to the Yale Glee Club's first trip to Argentina in 1941. Just one performance or one visit can have ripple effects even across generations.
In 1941, the Glee Club would head south of the equator, the first to do so on a tour through South America.
Because of the war, there was no transatlantic passage, so they worked on the first South American tour.
The State Department, the country as a whole, very, very aware of how important it was that the United States be viewed favorably, because the huge extreme competition for influence clearly going on at that time.
Cordell Hull, the then Secretary of State, would call up Marshal Bartholomew, the director of the Yale Glee Club, and ask him to put America's good neighbor policy to work. In the truest sense of the word, the Yale Glee Club was being called upon to be an ambassador.
Oh, the anchor is weighed and the sails they are set.
on a liner 65 strong.
We're bound for Rio Grande.
There happened to be a group of models to some kind of an engagement in Rio. It brightened the trip a lot.
And when you think of the opportunities for us, who are mostly states-bound, here we are, we're going off to Ecuador, Peru, Brazil.
So very well, my bonny young girl, we are bound for Rio.
Chile, Panama, Argentina.
The University of La Plata didn't have any school of music. There were only private conservatories to study music. It started with that first flash.
Vamos todos, venga pressa, vamos todos para casa da vozinha.
Unos cuantos estudiantes de ingeniería fuimos a escucharlo. Y al quedar extasiados después de ese concierto,
They were in the highest part. They couldn't go to the stage and say hello to anybody. They are just people, the audience.
que quedamos tan emocionados que precisamente alguien dijo, ¿por qué no hacemos nosotros también un coro? Que no teníamos ni idea, ni teníamos idea de la trascendencia que podía tener y que en definitiva la tuvo.
It appears like possible to make a group of people singing together.
No existían coros universitarios antes del coro de ingeniería ni antes del coro universitario de La Plata. No existían.
They were the founders of the first university choir in Argentina. And after that, the other universities started to have their choirs.
El coro de Yale fue, digamos, el alma mater, el inspirador de ese movimiento coral universitario en toda la Argentina, en toda la Argentina.
Now we have more than 5,000 choirs. Every member of the university choir, they all know this. So it's part of their own history. That was a very valuable beginning.
The extent to which music can bind people who don't know each other, the fact that that impact is still here today, that speaks to the power of that relationship.
We're just reinforcing history, and it just showed that it not only transcends language, it also transcends time.
With World War II in full swing, many Yale Glee Club members served in the armed forces.
The student population was dramatically affected, and of course that affected the Glee Club too. You come to the war years and suddenly the group is either much smaller, or you see a lot of members of the Glee Club in not white tie and tails, but in military uniforms.
Those left behind continued to do all they could with the blending of their voices. Barty's work also raised the U.S. Army's awareness of the role music could play in improving soldiers' morale. Barty would be called upon by the White House to consult with our military and would compile the Army Songbook, where men and women could find comfort and inspiration through song.
Immediately after World War II, it was probably the time when the greatest proportion of the student body were involved in some form of organized singing. The slogan at the time, because swimming was also a huge deal here, was that if you're going to Yale, it's sing or swim.
Wait while our song slides the sky.
while other colleges had 1, maybe 2 a cappella groups. We had 9 or 10 or 11, and now I think currently there are 17.
We had 4 choruses, 4 men's choruses. The freshman chorus, which didn't quite make the Glee Club, the freshman Glee Club, the Apollo Glee Club, we kind of like a JV, and the varsity Glee Club, which is the Yale Glee Club. And like a football thing and a great university, you try to work your way up.
And it was played just as much as if it were football or basketball. It was a major extracurricular activity on this campus that was part of the Yale tradition.
Barty and the Yale Glee Club would return to Europe in 1949.
And hear the tale we have to tell of the Battle of the Books.
While the scars of battle were still visible, the healing had begun. Some songs like Bright College Years would be too painful for German audiences. Not because of the lyrics, but rather the old German melodies which stirred up memories of the war years. The Yale Glee Club would respect the German audience's request not to sing these old controversial songs as they continued their first tour through post-war Europe. The Yale Songbook, compiled by Marshal Bartholomew, would be used by generations of singers.
That was an important influence, that the music that the Yale Glee Club sang got published and filtered out into the rest of the country. And same with the men that were at Harvard. You know, those Archibald T. Davison arrangements, they're the music that we knew for male chorus.
That spread the reputation outside the U.S. and outside the sort of American collegiate alumni network.
There were 3 directors before him, certainly got it going, but he picked it up and then he took it on the road, so to speak, to Europe and beyond, to South America. And by that time, the Yale Glee Club had become a world-recognized male chorus.
The idea that you can build connections between people through choral singing by sharing music has become the mission for many choirs today.
It's no longer unique, although it was in the 1920s. And I think not only the Glee Club, but I think choral conductors all over the world have him to thank for that. On many levels, he was a pioneer.
In a way, it was inevitable. After all the history and tradition, the Yale Glee Club experience would help mold its next director, Fenno Heath.
Fenno had sung under Barty. He also, in the last couple of years, was Barty's associate conductor. He fit right in. I mean, the next day, he was there.
As a protege of Marshal Bartholomew, Fenno's natural musical gifts, combined with Barty's mentoring, molded a very effective leader.
He just knew how to orchestrate us, if you will, in performance, and we would follow his gesture, and we knew that material cold, and the audience could tell.
Really could place your confidence in him, put yourself in his hands, and you knew that you were going to come through as an individual and as a chorus.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child.
His arrangements are really wonderful. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. That is a great arrangement. Now there's an incredibly harmonic, juiced modulation in the middle, typical of Fenno, actually.
It felt awfully good to sing Heath arrangements.
Sometimes I feel like I've never been born.
The great spirit which he evoked, in his music making was quite special.
Sometimes I feel like I've never been born.
Unlike Barty, who was really basically an arranger of folk songs and things like that, Fenno was a composer.
craftsmanship comes out of his really good taste in poetry and really good tastes in literature. And he found some wonderful texts to set, and I think that was very moving for the Yale Glee Club.
They were quite different than what we were singing under Marshal Bartholomew, and yet they were really good.
He studied with Paul Hindemith here at Yale, and so he became the embodiment of the choral director of the 1900s. Not only someone who could inspire and motivate the students to good singing, but could also arrange and compose.
Fenno continued to explore new repertoire to try to keep moving the group into new musical territory. He certainly continued the tradition of collaborating with women's colleges on major works. Smith was the most important collaborator for Yale in the 1940s, 50s, and into the 1960s, because Smith was the strongest women's glee club in the Seven Sisters.
I was an undergraduate at Mount Holyoke College. To sing with the Yale Glee Club and to sing the Verdi Requiem opened up vistas of choral music and music that I had never, ever been exposed to before.
It began to be embraced as a really valid musical organization. That's been fed because the repertoire had become more serious. They don't just sing, Bula Bula or those fight songs or all the kind of repertoire which sort of had its roots in the German university tradition.
The Yale Glee Club became a champion for new music, premiering and publishing new works by many major composers. Tarantella by Randall Thompson and A Galgentritt by Paul Hindemith would appear in the G. Schirmer Choral Series. The Glee Club would continue to be ambassadors for Yale and the USA. Fenno made sure that the commitment that Barty had made to international diplomacy through music continued, meeting with high-level officials and even royalty.
This is something that Fenno took very seriously, something that he spent a lot of time developing, making sure that when the Glee Club traveled, they were reaching the right kinds of audiences.
One audience member was Simon Carrington. The Glee Club performance would prove to be an important part of his musical inspiration.
When I was asked how did I get into this whole business, I used to say it was a combination of various influences, and it would be, of course, King's College Choir and my own chorister background, but also a concert by the Yale Glee Club because of the wealth of repertoire they did, and the fact that you had all those men on stage, and then the Whiffenpoofs at that time were part of the group, stepped to the front and did, what we now think of kind of close harmony arrangements, and played a large part in my musical life anyway.
During the height of the Cold War, they would tour Europe and even perform behind the Iron Curtain. As the Glee Club approached its centennial year of 1961, they would return to South America and receive recognition for what they had done 20 years earlier.
Subí a la escalera, una de las primeras cosas que encontraba era la placa que fue puesta en 1961 y recordaba la visita del Yale Glee Club. Quiero dar con eso una idea de la trascendencia que en la historia del coro y en la ciudad tuvo aquella histórica visita, a la que, por cierto,
Spirit of youth, alive, unchanging, under whose feet.
Their 1965 nine-week tour was a high point, with 40 concerts in Japan, Thailand, New Delhi, and Bombay. They would also sing in Moscow and Leningrad.
The Ed Sullivan Show.
Here is the great Yale Glee Club.
And if the Beatles and Stones could do it, why not the Yale Glee Club? Yes, they would appear on the Ed Sullivan Show. Soon, Fenno and the Yale Glee Club would face one of its greatest challenges and opportunities, the integration of women into the all-male world that was Yale.
When Yale University went co-ed, Fenno Heath said, God meant men and women to sing in a chorus together. God meant there to be a mixed chorus. And then Fenno basically said, let there be a mixed chorus at Yale. And so there was, and he never looked back.
In 1971, Fenno would make perhaps the most dramatic change the Yale Glee Club had yet experienced in its 100-plus years. Male and female students would sing together, travel together, and build upon the Glee Club's tradition together.
And that wasn't as easy to do because it was not only a changing of the student culture in terms of singing, it was a changing of the alumni culture. Because now you had generations of alumni who were used to singing the all-male songs, and now they came back to campus and heard an entirely different sound altogether.
The backlash from the alumni was enormous. I'm sure there was support too, but what got presented to us, certainly by Fenno, is that this is a wonderful thing, it's about time it happened, and we're going to make great music.
That changed the nature of the sound that the chorus makes. It extends what chords can be sung.
You could hear it, for instance, if you hear two Shenandoahs.
It's 7 long years since last I see thee.
Fenno also recognized that the a cappella culture at Yale was no longer going to be an all-male culture. Fenno takes this small group of women under his wing and encourages them to start a women's a cappella group, the New Blue.
It was the first women's organization of any kind. We figured our counterpart were the Whiffs, and we sang a spoof of the traditional Whiff and Poof song.
Protests, sit-ins, the May Day riots. Students were expressing themselves in new ways. Some students were losing interest in the old traditions. There were more important things to do in the world. Would Fenno be able to convince enough students of the relevance of the Yale Glee Club?
He embraced women when they came to campus and included them as part of this tradition. He could have kept them apart. He could have seen the Glee Club dive into irrelevance, as it were. He did what he needed to do to keep the tradition alive and at the same time evolve.
The Yale Glee Club will sing several kinds of songs, showing the variety of styles which have made our organization a link between the traditions of the past and the musical needs of the present.
Although controversial, the move from men's to mixed chorus opened a new world of choral repertoire to the Glee Club and created exciting new opportunities. Under Fenno's leadership, the club soon began performing under the baton of leading guest choral conductors, most notably Robert Shaw.
He used to hang around some colleges. He spent summers for long years at Westminster, for instance, in Princeton. And Shaw came and said, well, you know, Bach shouldn't sound like Brahms, even though it's the same singers. Let's see if we can figure out what choral style is all about. And I think that's one of the most significant things he brought to us. He made a standard of choral performance that was without peer.
Those were years of redefining what the Glee Club was, while maintaining all of the things that were most important to the Glee Club in previous years.
We were definitely infused with this great sense of not just tradition, but continuity in that tradition.
And that means so much to alumni because now we come together not only have a shared love of song, but because we could unite around a personality like a Fenno, like a Marshal Bartholomew.
It's the annual alumni singing dinner held in the President's Hall in New York City at the Yale Club.
You go to singing dinners and you watch a student from 2008 talking to someone who graduated in 1947 like they were in the same choir right now and talking and telling stories about tours.
And then about every 5 minutes, Jeff or someone gets up and says, okay, time for a song.
It's 7 long years since last I see thee.
They really want to know about you. They want to know about your plans for the future. They're just so incredibly passionate about it. I just was so much happier to be in it after I realized even more so what an amazing group it is.
Since last I see thee.
They are our foremost organization that forges musical relationships with alumni.
It really becomes an ageless organization. You have a common experience that binds you almost immediately. What you create together is so much bigger than anything you could create yourself.
In the 1990s, something new emerged. The alumni wanted to perform on stage again.
It was the migration of alumni engagement from passive to participative.
The alumni, all different ages from all over the United States and the world, would need guidance and support. This was a challenge that David Connell, the Glee Club's 6th director, would be determined to make a success.
If there were alumni that were willing to come together and sing, he was willing to take the great leap and see what we could create.
Within 2 years, 300 alumni and friends were traveling under the aegis of the Yale Alumni Chorus to China with David Connell as our founding director.
They did not think they would ever be able again to relive the experience of representing Yale and making the beautiful music they were making as part of this tradition.
While the formal concerts were rewarding, the interaction with alumni and their audiences was an even greater thrill.
It's not really about reliving the college days, but it's about sharing once again what you can do when you have extraordinary musicians around you.
3 years later, the Alumni Chorus would embark on its second tour, the year of Yale's tercentennial. Russia was their first stop. The Yale Alumni Chorus even made a return appearance at the Llangollen International Musical Eisteddfod in northern Wales, where the Glee Club had competed in previous decades. There was a visit to the gravesite of Elihu Yale. And after the second tour, the Yale Alumni Chorus had established itself as a positive force for the university and for the cause of service through music wherever they visited.
We've always done exchanges and outreach efforts, but it wasn't necessarily as conscious of what you were doing.
Alumni don't come together merely for the act of making great music. They come together knowing that they can change lives because of that activity, which adds a whole other dimension as to why they would choose to come together and reconnect as Yale singers. With Fenno passed a generation of choral directors that were known for their ability to arrange, their compositional, but the art of choral singing evolved as well over time. David brought with him a greater spiritual understanding of the nature of music.
Under Connell's leadership, the Yale Glee Club would perform the classics and continue the tradition of exploring new music. The Yale Glee Club engaged with local musicians and university choirs on its first ever tour of Africa. The Yale Glee Club and Yale Alumni Chorus have been learning from one another in recent years, the Glee Club gaining inspiration from the Alumni Chorus's commitment to choral music as a way to build bridges between people and cultures. In 2003, Jeffrey Dahmer would become the 7th director of the Yale Glee Club. It's the beginning of the fall semester, and as it's been done for over 100 years, so it is on this September evening. It's audition time.
Good. And I'm going to encourage you to feel the energy moving down this way as you go.
Jeff brings to the kids today something that he's brought to the Alumni Chorus to its great advantage, is an education, an awareness of the music. It is an absolutely wonderful and rich experience for today.
Jeff focuses a great deal on just the sheer beauty of the tonal production.
He's a fantastic musician, a fabulous conductor, and he's really getting them to sing extremely well.
He has brought an uncompromising desire for excellence in singing.
We performed pieces that were hard and pieces that were maybe harder than any of us thought we could achieve. But he really believed in the choir and in the ability of people to come together and produce something that's greater than they thought they could achieve.
A distinguished procession of guest conductors, including Sir Neville Marriner, Christoph Penderecki, Sir David Wilcox, and Helmut Rilling. Collaborations with Yale's Camerata, Schola Cantorum, Philharmonia, and Symphony Orchestra commissioned works by composers like Dominic Argento, James Macmillan, Louis Spratlin, and Ned Rorem. These have added even more richness and variety to the club's musical experience.
Jeff has continued to make sure that he always features some of the more traditional Glee Club ingredients, which represent really their tradition and history, but he's also very adventurous on the other side.
Jeff really believes that it's important for choruses to both sing established works from sort of the canon, but also to keep on contributing to the body of work that exists.
He is leading efforts to foster student-created new music from concept to concert.
The commissioning that the Glee Club is doing, it's a wonderful new branch of activity. One is called the Fenno Heath Award, which is to honor the best song about the Yale experience written by a current Yale student.
And that's something that is effective not just for the composer that writes the new piece that wins the competition, but also for the 80-plus people in the Glee Club every year who get to see that music as something that can be written by undergrads at Yale.
He's now started this composer competition with being published by Boozy and Hawkes. I mean, this is a very, very important development, and that's a significant initiative. The pieces that have been written in this competition have been very, very interesting.
It's just been a constant source of excitement and creativity for me because we're always performing new music. I'm getting to write new music for Glee Club, which is a great experience. And I really can't imagine the Glee Club without it.
A composer needs to have a performance, needs to have an ensemble for that work to be complete. This is the challenge for new music everywhere. I think it's important for all of us, for every choir, every orchestra, every instrumental group to be part of that.
In 2005, the Glee Club continued its long tradition of global choral exchange by performing with the Melbourne University Choral Society and Sydney University Musical Society, among other groups, on its first ever tour to Australia. It's not just about traveling. Some of the greatest rewards can happen right on campus.
The Yale Glee Club does something that is so important. They go into the community and say, here, come to our school, come to our campus, be a part of our program.
On this much anticipated day, 4 high school choirs from New Haven are joining with the Yale Glee Club in the historic Woolsey Hall under the direction of guest conductor Peter Bagley.
One of the key things that these kids yearn for is discipline. And so even though they're doing it in music, they are doing something which is important together. And it's the togetherness of that makes the musical expression.
Since we're all different people, we kind of came together closer because we all shared this one thing in common that brought us together in the first place.
They see a group that just really loves singing, and it's inspired the choral communities within the New Haven Public Schools to really blossom.
It's not just about the art, it's not just about your fellow students and your friendships with your fellow students, but it's actually about doing something meaningful to spark an inspiration for some young, talented student in New Haven to shoot for the stars.
This is not something that is confined to the Ivy League walls. This is something for everybody, for anyone who wants to sing and who loves music. This is something that everyone can take part
Now there is a very conscious effort to go and meet the people away from the tails, away from the rest, who join with them. We never joined with almost anybody. It was always the Yale Glee Club. I'm very proud of what they do.
think of how happy Barty would be, because that was his legacy. We're carrying on his legacy.
The making of music together creates something larger than what we start with. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. I wouldn't trade it for anything.